was starting my PhD, I had this habit of reading each and every paper about the end of the world. I wanted to make sure that I finish all my academic duties before it all ends. You know, my mom always said, if I die, at least I die a doctor. The article I was reading at the beginning of 2011 was no different. It was discussing how the world is going to end because the Mayan calendar is about to end. And in Beebe, Arkansas, while everybody was celebrating, 5,000 birds fall out of the sky, all completely dead. No sign of poison or disease. Well, it is the end of the world. I was really wondering about why people are so worried. Why do they think this is the end of the world? So I went on Google Trends, and I was searching for the words bird's death and how people are searching it over time. And I've noticed something very unusual, that in 2011, people were searching for the terms bird's death much more than usual. And actually, this is not the first time. So it happened in Arkansas, but before that in Austin, in Norway, and in other places. The story doesn't end here for Beebe, Arkansas. A few days before that, 100,000 fish wash out to the shore, all completely dead. If you look at how people are searching for the terms fish death, you see this most interesting phenomena. Again, people are searching for fish death much more than usual, but they usually search for fish death and bird's death approximately in the same time. In the newspapers, they published that there is no correlation, nothing in common, those are natural causes. So what we did at that time with fellow researchers, we wrote a computer program that was looking for everything in common to those places that people were searching for fish death and bird's death. And what we found out is that in all those places, 6 months before that, people were searching for the terms oil spill much more than usual. So I don't know if this is what happened in Beebe, Arkansas, but the main oil pipeline is going through Beebe, Arkansas, and it had issues in the past as well. But this got me thinking that if we knew about that oil spill can cause fish death and bird death after 6 months, maybe we could have predicted that. But for me, I didn't understand why oil spill would cause fish death and bird's death 6 months later. I understand if it happens now, a lot of the fish die, but why 6 months? I talked to my friend, he's a biologist. I told him about this correlation. He's like, yeah, that's obvious. Like, well, what's obvious? Like, well, oil spill cause oxygen depletion, and it takes 3 to 6 months to actually get to that. And this is cause number 1 for fish death. Well, that's only obvious to him. But in order to predict future events, you gotta get those type of understandings. You gotta be this biologist. And in order to predict the future, you gotta go deep. So instead of only looking at what people were searching for and trying to predict the future based on only that, we went 150 years back to all the New York Times articles ever published. We got billions of tweets, real-time in social media, and we started building a causality model. The way we were doing that, we were building a natural language processing algorithm that would analyze the text and understand who did the action, on what it was done, and in what location. So for example, in this case, tanker merchant ship collide, which is the sentence in those articles, the system would understand that the tanker is doing the action, the collision is the action, and it was done on a merchant ship in Singapore. We would look for phrases like because of, causes, and see that this will cause oil spill in Singapore. We eventually ended up with 300 million nodes, billions of edges, built on around 20 machines. At the time we were building that, I had to go to each and every student in our university and ask them whether I can use their machine for a short period of time, like a month. So it wasn't that trivial. But what we had at that point is all the human causality knowledge, and the system was monitoring all the newspapers and trying to predict future news events. So we knew based on this causality graph that storms can cause cholera. We were really interested in epidemics because we're working with a lot of doctors, especially with Microsoft research. Cholera is a waterborne disease, so this is not that surprising that storms can cause it. But still, predicting that is something not obvious. Why some storms cause cholera and others don't? So we started looking for not only things that we know, like in this causality graph, but also for correlations in order to find surprises. What our system was finding is that in all those places where storms caused cholera, 2 years before that, they had a drought. This was based on around 6 examples from Angola up to 2006. Well, if we're building a statistical model based on only 6 examples, this is not very reliable. But what if I told you that in Bangladesh, since 1960, there were 19 significant cases of cholera. Before 84% of them, they had a drought. But what's in common between Angola and Bangladesh? Why doesn't it happen in New York, for example? So we started adding more and more human knowledge to answer those type of questions. We started adding Wikipedia, government data sets, and start to look what is in common. So it can be the ethnic groups, how many people are living there, the government type. What our system found out is that only 2 things matter. One is the GDP. Well, if the country is not rich, they might have the cholera epidemic. And the second thing is the percent of water. And what was surprising for me is that if you have low percent of water, you have higher chances of cholera. And this is surprising because cholera is a waterborne disease. You would expect if you have a lot of water, you're going to see that one. So I talked to my fellow researchers with medical background. It's like, well, this is clear. The way to cure cholera is using clean water. So countries that didn't have enough water couldn't cure disease. In 2011, our system started alerting about a cholera outbreak in Cuba. This was happening because it detected that they have a drought. At that time, I was pretty much ignoring that because this would be the first cholera outbreak in Cuba in 130 years, so I just thought this is an outlier. A year later, our system started alerting with much higher probability about the cholera outbreak because of the storms. We started alerting fellow researchers, and again, the first cholera outbreak in Cuba in 130 years happened in January 2013. Cholera is a disease that 100,000 people die from each year. And if you get them clean water in time, the mortality rate dropped from 50% to less than 1%. So using this kind of systems that look for this type of correlations can save lives. At that time, I was also interested in other aspects of our system. Especially, I wanted to buy an iPad, and I wanted to know what's going to happen with its price. And my system started saying that the price is going to go up. I was like, what? Well, why now? And it showed me that this is all because of the tsunami in Japan. I was like, what? But it turns out the following thing, that the tsunami in Japan is hitting the factories. Our system saw that those factories are supplying some of the materials to other factories in China. It saw it from another newspaper that it actually read that they have this relationship. And it saw in the past that if the factories don't have one of the materials, they will not have time to supply it, build the product, and the price will go up, affecting the iPad prices in the United States. And this got me thinking that we have all this machine that's looking for all this like macroeconomical level details and can help us predict what's going on with our economy. But again, as we saw before, only knowing macroeconomical level data is not enough to sell. You've got to know what happens when you sell to a specific company based on your own data. So what we started doing in Sales Predict, we were taking data from a specific company, trying to help them grow, look where they won in the past, where they lost, gather all type of information from the web, and then try to predict who's their best customer, who they should sell to. And we ended up with something which is, for me, extremely exciting. Think about all those years that we're trying to build a model for economy. You have people winning Nobel Prizes for that, for a single equation. And here we have a way to simulate all our economy, either from a macroeconomical level, like with the iPads, or microeconomical level when you're trying to predict for a B2B business who to sell to. This actually gets us to a really interesting point in time. Like in algo trading, at one point, people were selling and playing in the stock market, and now you have so much automated systems doing exactly what people were doing in the past. So I think this is exactly what's going on now in economy, even in the more traditional sales economy, that you can not only rely on your own instincts, because you've got to do it fast, you have so much data going on, and you must be more productive. And think about the fact that with all this data, we can now get to insights across entire industries. We can tell in those industries, this is the type of companies you need to work with. But not in this time, because the government is not allowing this type of products, and they don't have the benefits from that. And although a lot of people are talking about big data today, I think big data is not interesting. I think what you do with big data is interesting. I think there is a lot of decision-making tools that gotta be made. Most of the companies actually have small data. I know everybody's saying they have a lot of it, but actually there are very few data points, which is really important. And then you have to model what people already know and get it inside the system. It doesn't matter that they have 10 years of sales data. And this is the prospects that I see in this world, that with all this data, not only that we can model the economy and make companies grow in a much faster way, this is exactly the same patterns that we can use and already been using in medicine in order to predict any cure to any disease, that we've been using in politics to predict where there's going to be a war. And it's interesting. Everything is based on the same data. Thank you very much. If you have more questions, booth 25.